As we've discussed, ACI is not managed with the CLI anymore. We have to use some level of API control, and fortunately Cisco gives us a GUI that on the back end uses those APIs so that we don't actually have to dive right into ACI using the APIs. We can dive in using this graphical user interface. By the end of this nugget, we're going to be able to navigate around the GUI, understand what it looks like, and how to configure various ACI components. Before we take a look at the GUI, let's just quickly review how Cisco architected ACI to be managed. So we know we have these APIC controllers, and in a traditional architecture, let's say we have a router down here, Cisco exposes the configuration of the router via the CLI, and we as humans, using computers of course, have access to the CLI in order to configure the router, in this case, directly. Now with the APIC, they didn't expose any kind of CLI. Instead, they exposed the APIs, or the application programming interfaces, and we as humans, unfortunately, we don't have access to APIs. We just can't do it. We need an intermediary because the APIs are designed to be accessed by machines. So we need some kind of interface in order to access the APIC via those APIs. Now, what this is here is modular. So Cisco gives us a GUI interface, or graphical user interface, in order to access the APIC. And we can use the GUI for as long as we want. Alternatively, this is where other applications come in. For example, we could use Python scripting. We could also use Postman to leverage the fact that the APIC has REST APIs exposed. And so we have a lot of different options for how to configure this APIC controller. Cisco didn't just give us one point of interface via the CLI. They really gave us a lot of different options. But yes, on first opening ACI up and throwing it into our racks, we're going to, by default, want to use the GUI interface that Cisco has given us. Now that said, I had mentioned earlier that Cisco did give us a CLI, which is kind of interesting because you say, well, wait a second, Jeff, you just made a pretty big distinction between the fact that there's an API exposure and CLI exposure between these two different devices. Well, the difference is that the CLI doesn't have native access to the controller. In other words, the CLI, just like the GUI, it's really the same concept, where they both leverage the APIs in order to configure the APIC controller. Whereas with the routers that had GUIs, for example, those GUIs would actually still leverage the CLI on the back end. So we, again, as humans, we'd access the GUI, and any changes that we'd make in the GUI would really just translate to CLI commands, and the CLI would handle the configuration of the router. So there is an architectural difference between the CLI that ACI exposes and the CLI of traditional networking devices. So here we go. Here's the dashboard for the GUI, and right away we're met with the system health. This is a fantastic tool because just at a glance we can see that, okay, we've got some health issues going on here for whatever reason. Our health has fluctuated a little bit over the last couple hours, and our overall score is an 89 out of 100. And we can maybe could drill in on the right and we see, oh, we do have some system issues going on right now. Maybe there's a couple of switches that are overheating or a couple of ports that are seeing packet discards. Whatever the situation, we understand that things aren't running in a 100% perfect scenario here. In fact, we look down and we can see the breakdown that Leafs 1, 2, and Spines 1 and 2, so it's a 4-switch architecture. They all have a health score of 90. So chances are there's something environmentally going on where all of these switches are affected. So we can go to the controllers on the right, and from there click on topology, and we can see where our 3 different APICs are attached. 2 of them are connected to Leaf 1, and 1 of them is connected to Leaf 2. That would be the active connection, because really all of them have redundant connections as well, but active connections are going through the Leaf switches that are being shown. We can click on the Fabric tab up here, and we can take a look at the topology for our pod. So we take a look and we get, again, at a glance, some information, uplinks, downlinks, their statuses, and we can come over here to the topology, and here we can see the full topology. Now it's a little out of order here. We can drag this around, but we can actually see the 2 different spines, the 2 different leaves, how they're all interconnected to each other. Let's just drag this down, drag this down, drag this over. And we can start to see that, oh yes, okay, so this is the leaf spine architecture that we've been talking about, and the APICs are connected in at the leaf layer. This tab is where we configure 2 different sets of policies, the fabric policies and the access policies. So really, the fabric policies would be everything that is north, split the leaves in 2, I didn't do a great job with that line, but everything north of the leaves, this is the fabric side. So the IP addressing that's used, configuration, the ports, everything that has to do with the fabric itself is configured via the fabric policies up here. And then everything south of this would be the access policies. So again, right next to it up here on the right, we have the access policies. As a quick overview, the virtual networking is where we configure our integration with our hypervisors. L4 to L7 services is a feature of ACI that we will be covering. It involves the ability to integrate tightly with load balancers and firewalls. Admin tab is where we do administrative services for ACI. Operations, this is where we can use troubleshooting tools. There's some great troubleshooting tools on this tab, and we're going to go over these in great detail throughout the course of our ACI skills. And then the apps tab. The apps tab is almost like its own application store. So think of it like Android or Apple having their app store. ACI actually has this as well. So maybe we can go out there and download some troubleshooting tools and things of those natures that people have configured around the exposed APIs that ACI offers. And so that's a quick overview, kind of a flyover of the ACI GUI that we use to manage the environment. Cisco changed the way that we access the network with ACI. We no longer have CLI access natively. We have to go through some level of API communications with the controller in order to make configuration changes. Now, Cisco gave us two tools, really. The one that we explored in this nugget would be the GUI, and that comes by default with every ACI instance. Cisco also exposed a CLI that we'll take a look at in another nugget. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.